Tipping used to be simple. You went to a restaurant, had a nice meal, and if the service was good, you left a tip. 10%, maybe 15%. It was a reward for effort, something you chose to give. Today, tipping feels like a mandatory charge. Screens pop up everywhere: coffee shops, takeout counters, self checkouts, asking for 20%, 25%, even 30% tips for things that didn't involve tips at all just a few years ago. But where did this all start? Why has tipping in America become so extreme and so awkward? To understand, you have to look back, way back. Tipping didn't start in America. It came from Europe in the 1800s, where it was used by the wealthy to show off. Rich Americans traveling abroad brought the custom home. But in the US, it took a different shape. After the Civil War, many employers, especially in railroads and hospitality, used tipping as a way to avoid paying wages to newly freed black workers. The system was exploitative by design. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act created the federal minimum wage, but it allowed an exception for tipped workers. They could be paid just a fraction, as long as tips made up the difference. Today, that federal tipped wage is still just $2.13 an hour. Yes, $2.13. That system hasn't changed. Instead, the culture around it has exploded. And in the 2010s, something happened that tipped the whole system into overdrive: the touchscreen. Companies like Square and Toast revolutionized small business payments. Suddenly, a local cafe didn't need a giant cash register, just a tablet. But those tablets did more than ring up sales. They introduced the modern tipping prompt. Before your latte is even made, you're shown options: tip 20%, 25%, 30%, with big buttons and colorful designs. And the no tip option, often hidden or harder to find. These screens created a new kind of pressure. It's no longer just about generosity, it's about social tension. The barista is standing right there. People are in line behind you. It's not a private decision anymore, it's public. And businesses know this. Studies show that when tipping options are presented digitally, people tip more, often by double digits. Some call it tipflation. And it's real. In just a few years, the number of businesses asking for tips has skyrocketed. Coffee shops, bakeries, retail counters, even self-serve yogurt shops and food trucks. You're being asked to tip for things that used to be unthinkable. Part of the problem is that the US has never resolved the core issue: who should be responsible for paying workers? In most countries, employers pay a living wage. In the US, that responsibility has quietly shifted to customers. And the line between fair compensation and guilt-driven charity keeps getting blurrier. Food delivery apps make it worse. Uber Eats, DoorDash, Instacart, they ask for a tip before the order is even delivered. And the suggested amounts? Often 20% or more. But who gets that tip? Sometimes it's the driver. Sometimes it's pooled. And sometimes part of it goes to the company itself. It's not always clear. Then there's self-checkout. In 2023, videos went viral of customers being asked to tip at a machine. No employee, no service, just a touchscreen that asks for money. And people are paying it. Why? Psychology. Behavioral economists call it default bias. If the screen shows 25% as the default, many people won't change it. If no tip is hidden or feels rude, they avoid it. The systems are designed to push you toward higher tips, without ever asking if the situation even calls for one. And this system adds up. Tipping in America is now a $50 billion industry, not driven purely by goodwill, but by guilt. Workers often feel stuck, reliant on tips for income, but uncomfortable asking. Customers feel overwhelmed, expected to tip constantly even when service is minimal or non-existent. Meanwhile, employers benefit. They can offer lower wages, knowing customers will make up the difference. And tech platforms profit too, taking a percentage of every transaction, including tips. Some even charge processing fees on the tips you leave. The system is built to keep pushing forward. There's also confusion. What should you tip at a counter? What about for pickup? Should you tip at a buffet? What if the owner is working the register? There are no clear answers, just a growing sense that tipping has spun out of control. And people are getting frustrated. In 2022, A Pew survey found that two-thirds of Americans feel tipping is expected too often. Social media is full of tipping horror stories. Tip jars at drive-thrus, tip prompts for buying a bottle of water, even tipping requests at dentist offices. No joke. Some businesses are pushing back. A few high-end restaurants in New York and San Francisco have moved to a no-tip model, raising menu prices and paying workers directly. Customers like the simplicity. But it's still rare. Most restaurants stick with the old system, afraid that changing it will cost them business. Workers are split too. Some prefer tips. They can make more than minimum wage on a good night. Others want consistency, less reliance on customer mood, more control over income. And yet the biggest problem remains. The legal minimum wage for tipped workers is still absurdly low. Until that changes, businesses will continue to rely on tipping to cover basic pay. And customers will keep footing the bill. So, what can you do? First, understand your power as a consumer. Support businesses that pay fair wages and don't rely on guilt tipping. Ask questions. Where does the tip go? How are workers paid? Second, tip generously when service deserves it, but don't feel bad when it doesn't. You're not a bad person for saying no to a tip screen at self-checkout. And finally, realize that tipping isn't the problem. The system behind it is. A system where workers are underpaid, employers avoid responsibility, and guilt is weaponized to fill the gap. Tipping should be a choice, a thank you, not an obligation, and definitely not a trick.